Hello and welcome to English 329B, English Literature on Film in the 21st Century. My name is Dr. Joseph Byrne, and I will be your instructor for the course. This video that you're watching is something I call a one-take video. You may have heard the term before. A take is a film term. A take is an attempted shot. Some directors take many takes before they find a shot that pleases them, and then they edit those takes together into a film. But when I say it's a one-take video, what I mean to say is that I hope to get it done in one try. Otherwise I could be here all day, because I'm a perfectionist. Anyway, one of these days I'll actually learn how to edit video, in which case I can make my one-take videos much more visually interesting. But in the meantime, you're just going to have to deal with my talking head. I'll be doing a video like this for all of the films on the syllabus, but in my videos I'll actually be spending more time talking about the books, the literary sources, rather than the films, since I feel like I cover that fairly well in my film essays. What I'm particularly interested in is the bookishness of books. That is, books as material objects. That's not something that typically comes across visually in film adaptations. It's one of the many things about books that does not translate to film. In just a moment I'll be talking about my print edition of Shakespeare, but right now I want to talk about my relationship with Shakespeare, my life with the Bard. Growing up, we had quite a few editions of Shakespeare. We did not have one big book with all of the Shakespeare plays. We had a few individual play books in a small format, green covered cloth. I think it was the Grove edition. I did a search for it online, couldn't find it, so I guess you can't get them anymore. I don't know what happened to ours either. They're probably in a box somewhere. But all that is to say is that I did a little bit of reading of Shakespeare in my youth. Though when I was younger, it was probably more like, coloring with crayons in Shakespeare rather than actually reading it. When I was in high school, and you may have done this in some of your classes, in our English class, we decided to do a modern updating of a Shakespeare play. We chose The Merchant of Venice. Somehow I came up with the role of Antonio. I think maybe I had one line. I remember distinctly when it came time to produce our play on stage in the high school, when it came time for my line, it came out something like, blah, 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 blah. I forgot my line. Anyway, it was embarrassing, but we managed to survive. All of that did not discourage me from trying out for the theater company when I was in college, and it was a fairly traditional theater company. We did the classics, including Shakespeare, twice. The first Shakespeare play I was in was called Taming of the Shrew. I played Lucentio, the young romantic lead. I burn, I pine, I perish. That was one of my lines, so at least I remember one of my lines from college. Then I was in Romeo and Juliet. I was the County Paris. So I was the guy that Juliet kills herself rather than marry. Needless to say, it made me a little insecure of that particular role and why I was chosen for it. But anyway, I still can't understand why she wanted to marry that slacker Romeo rather than the perfectly legitimate and rich County Paris. But that's just me. Also in college, I had a special hat that said Shakespeare on it. You know, it was a ball cap. I was very proud of myself that I'd found this literary hat and could, show it off to all my friends and teachers. However, I learned a little while after that my Shakespeare hat was actually advertising Shakespeare fishing gear. So I guess that's not so bad that I had a good old boy hat to appeal to the non-literary, and then I had Shakespeare for the literary. Um, I also took a Shakespeare course in college. Um, it actually I usually got A's, but I got a B in that particular course because in my main final paper I had the temerity um, to argue that Shakespeare was Catholic. So my professor didn't go for that. It was particularly writing about Hamlet. But actually, there's quite a lot of scholarship to support that contention. And in fact, I recently read a book about Shakespeare, a little show and tell here. It's called The Book of Air and Shadows. And this is a book by Michael Gruber. It's about Shakespeare. The Book of Air and Shadows is supposedly a quote from Shakespeare to describe the theater, but also describes literature fairly well. It's a pretty good read. It's written three different narratives. The first two narratives are sort of modern. They're sort of whiny and narcissistic. I didn't care for them. But there's a third narrative which it purports to be a contemporary of Shakespeare and quotes Shakespeare. Not in reality. That's the thing about Shakespeare and Shakespeare scholarship. We know practically nothing about him in his personal life. But anyway, I recommend the book. I also came across an article in the New Yorker recently. I don't know when it's from, but this is supposedly a portrait of Shakespeare. It's controversial because many people claim it doesn't look anything like Shakespeare. And we don't have too many real-life portraits. Anyway, that may be what Shakespeare looked like. So I guess you could call me a Shakespeare nerd. Since I've been in Shakespeare productions, I've seen many productions on stage and also many film adaptations as well. But it was relatively recently that I put Shakespeare on the syllabus. It took the place of Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland, which frankly is not a very good movie. It does some interesting things, but it's not that great. And I thought, teaching a literary adaptation class, I need to get Shakespeare in there because there's been so many adaptations of so many of his plays. So that is why The Tempest ended up on the syllabus. Also, the fact that Julie Taymor, the director, is a woman director, and typically women directors get left off of syllabi for film classes, and so I make it a point to include a female director. So Julie Taymor is now on the syllabus. Julie Taymor, I wrote about her in my film essay. But I think she's a brilliant director. And one I've taught before, I taught her Beatles musical Across the Universe, which I think is terrific. Some of the more fanatical Beatles fans have some issues with it, but I think it's a pretty brilliant film. So if you're into musicals and if you're into the Beatles music, you may want to check that out. I also recommend Frida, her Taymor's first film, her portrait of the Mexican artist Frida Kahlo. Also visually a brilliant film. So I'm going to say a few things now about the print edition of Shakespeare that I use. It's not the one I had in college. I had one of them big fat collected works. I don't know what happened to it, but I got another one when I was actually teaching Shakespeare. I'll just also mention that the Tempest, another good reason to add it to the syllabus is that it works better for the chronology of the course in terms of starting, early. The Shakespearean, Elizabethan era all the way up until the present. So now I'm going to do a little show and tell here with the my Shakespeare, which is the complete Pelican Shakespeare. It has all the plays and poetry and what have you. Let's see. First, you can see here, this is actually a facsimile of the 1623 folio title page, and has the author's portrait. So again, this one doesn't necessarily look too much like the other one I showed you earlier due to the controversy, but this is one of the few images that we can acknowledge belongs to Shakespeare. Anyway, that's his picture. It mentions, as you can see, comedies, histories, and tragedies. It doesn't mention not the pastoral, the romance category. That's something that comes later in the Shakespearean scholarship. And you'll notice, let me switch the catalog. Oh, that's all the various testimonies written in the front. The catalog here has the Tempest listed as first, when in fact scholars pretty much agree that the Tempest is one of the last, if not the last, play that Shakespeare wrote, somewhere around 1611. So, I'm going to show you some of what's called the critical apparatus. I mean, for people who love books, particularly scholars of books as a medium, tend to go for the critical apparatus, and by that I mean things like the critical introduction, notes, collations, images, pictures, what have you. For instance, let's see, that's the illustration of the globe. That's probably not a contemporary image. So here's the first page of the play, again the facsimile page, and let's see, the first page of the Tempest. It's at the end of the book here, with the notes. So in particular, the notes are important in Shakespeare because frankly, there's a lot of it you don't get unless it has substantial notes, basically translating into modern language, modern English, Elizabethan terms, and what have you. So that's probably, I don't know about you, but it was for me the first introduction to critical study of literature was Shakespeare, because it had the notes, and it had to have the notes if you were going to get it, unless you're going to do a modern updating, which is what we did. But even so, you need to know that Elizabethan language in order to translate it into more current lingo. So I think that's all I need to show you in terms of the notes and what have you. Okay, so that's a problematic thing about the films is, if you need notes to understand the language when you're reading it, what do you do when you're filming it and using that language? I suppose you could use subtitles to update it, but I don't think I've ever seen a Shakespeare play do that. So, in fact, the language itself is sort of iconic. It's what's part of the brand. It's what sells Shakespeare and Shakespeare plays in Shakespeare films. So, even though we don't understand a lot of it, we still are very attracted to the musicality of the language and all of the innovative things that Shakespeare did with language. But this is going to be an ongoing issue for us in this course, in terms of what do you do with style, with language, things like that. How do you translate that to film? Once you read all of my essays on all the films, you'll see that there are some equivalents in terms of language and ways to insert it in a film. So you don't totally lose the language, but it is an issue. Okay, I'm pretty much done here. And as I said, I'll be doing one of these one-take videos for all of the films in the course. I mean them to be fairly informal, and to give you really a taste of sort of my lecture slash conversational style in when I'm in the classroom. So I think it's important in an online class to be able to offer that. Um, a more you can see my face, and when we conferenced, I can see your faces and so on. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it there. Hopefully this isn't too long, and it will upload to YouTube, and I will be sending out the link shortly. Thanks for your attention. See you online.